Have you developed your own single page application and are wondering how to deploy it so people can actually go to it? Well, let me show you how. Hi guys, my name's Logan. Welcome back to Game Changer Labs. I know it's been quite a long time since I've posted on this YouTube channel. A lot of changes happening in my life. I can honestly say that all of them have been very positive. I ended up leaving my previous job, started a new job, went on a little trip out of the country for a little bit. And actually, I'll show you some footage right here. Also ended up getting a brand new laptop, specifically an M1 MacBook Pro. And so I was kind of setting up my environments and getting everything set up for the YouTube channel when I realized, hey, this might actually be a really good opportunity to show off some of my web development workflow and deployment process. This will be honestly a pretty quick tutorial, but I want to show you guys how to take something like an Angular application, build your Angular application, deploy it to the cloud in AWS, and actually set it up so that it's a secure site and people can actually go to it. And it looks like, honestly, it's a professional setup. We're not going to really do anything in the web development area like actually develop the website, but I at least want to be able to show you the deployment process and kind of how to set up an environment, maybe if you wanted to do this or learn about this. There's definitely a lot of steps to it, but I'll try to make it as easy as possible. And I'll also put the timelines of kind of each of the steps. So if you want to kind of skip some things or you're kind of already set up, like you've already have your environment set up, then, feel free to just jump ahead and jump in when you need to. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I need to do for my environment, because this is pretty much a fresh build for me, is actually install Node.js. You kind of need Node.js. Actually, backpedal a little bit. In my career in web development, I've done a lot of development using Angular, and a requirement of Angular is actually the Node.js environment. So let me go ahead. I'll kind of throw this up here. So what you want to do is you want to go to this site right here, nodejs.org, and you're going to go ahead and download the long-term support version. So this is the this time we're recording 16.14.2. It might be different, but I always tend to go with the long-term support version just because you know that whatever you're downloading is going to have support going forward for the foreseeable future until they tell you otherwise. So let's go ahead and get this install package going. It's going to install these things in those locations. And the main thing that we're looking for is the NPM library, because that's what's going to allow us to install Angular. So we'll go through the setup process. Yep, we agree. I've gone through this process many, many times, so I know exactly what I'm getting into. Let's go ahead and do the install. There we go. That is installed. Okay, yep, we want to go ahead and move that to the trash. And I am going to go ahead and move this out of the way. Oh, and by the way, as I'm kind of going through this process, I will be leaving all the instructions down below. So you can just click if you want to go through, click on the different links to kind of go through the process if you want to do that. But the next thing that we want to do is we want to set up Angular. So I'm going to go to terminal. We'll pull this up. There it is. Okay, so this is going to be, I'll put this in the center, and I'll probably zoom in on this because this is kind of a small window for my actual monitor setup. Actually, no, we'll just make it big. Okay, so the instructions for this are actually on the Angular site. I'll put a little link down here. And the first thing you want to do is a global install of Angular. So in this case, I'll put the command down below, but it's going to be npm install -g at angular/CLI. So we're going to do that. Let's see what it gives us. It might actually give us an error. Yes, so it's giving us an access error. So what we need to do is a sudo command. Actually, we'll do the npm install with sudo. There we go. It's going to ask for our password. So put in your password. And now it's going to go ahead and go through the install. And now what we want to do is we want to, okay, so I have several things set up here, but what I want to do is I want to make a folder for all of my kind of app development projects for web dev. And I tend to use WebStorm to kind of do all of this type of setup. So let me go ahead and do make directory. And so the command is mkdir, which makes the directory. I'm going to do WebStorm projects. Enter. So let's see if that created it. ls to list the directory. And yes, we can see that there is WebStorm projects. We'll change directory, which is cd, and do WebStorm projects. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is, since we're in the WebStorm projects directory, I am going to create a new project. So the command for this, and I'll put this on the screen, it's ng new. And we'll just call this maybe test app. Okay. Would you like to add Angular routing? Yeah, we'll just go ahead and add it. I mean, this is going to be a boilerplate thing. We're going to just set it up. It's going to ask you what type of style sheet format you'd like to use. It doesn't matter for this, whatever you're more comfortable with. I'll just choose standard CSS. In a lot of projects, I actually use SCSS as just like a personal preference thing. So now it's going to go ahead and go through and basically set up the project. And while that's doing that, I actually need to install WebStorm. So let me go ahead and go to the WebStorm site, and I will bring this over here. And let's go ahead and I'm going to download a demo version. This is what I typically do. I'll get the demo version, and then I'll buy the full product. With that being said, there are many free options out there. So if you want to use things like Visual Studio Code or maybe another IDE that doesn't cost money per year to use, honestly, they're all roughly the same. I'm very comfortable with WebStorm. I've been using WebStorm products or JetBrains products for a long time, especially like throughout my career. So I'm just going to stick with that. It keeps things easy for me. Okay, so that went ahead and downloaded. I clicked on the installer package, and it's giving us an option to drop WebStorm in our applications. So we will do that, and it should start. Yep, it's copying into applications. I'll go ahead and close this. Close that WebStorm installation. And let's bring that back over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure that actually copied over. Yep, WebStorm. So that is there. I'm going to go ahead and start opening that up. And let's open. Yep, there's a user agreement. Data sharing. I don't usually share. Cool. So we'll do start trial. And actually, I'm probably going to skip ahead and kind of get to the next step. This is just essentially if you want to activate your account or start a trial. Okay, sorry for the jump cut there. So I went ahead and did the trial setup process. And once that was all complete, it brought me back to the IDE. You might have to close out the window and go back into your IDE. In this case, I'm going to click Start Trial. Cool. So that trial is now going. Okay. So we have our projects, or we have the IDE open. It's going to ask us, hey, do we want to start a new project or do we want to open? So as you recall, we actually set up the project via CLI. So it should be good. Created packages installed successfully. So we can go ahead and minimize that, and we should be able to go to our WebStorm IDE window here and click open and navigate to our project. So as you can see, I have my WebStorm projects file with the test app, and you just want to click on the main test app directory, and we are going to open. We're going to trust the project because it was created via the CLI, and it should open here. All right. So we have a lot of stuff in here. And just for the sake of this project, let's go ahead and see kind of like what the status of it is. With Angular-based projects, actually, let me take a look. Yeah, so with Angular-based projects, I believe it's ng serve, and we're looking for -- open. And what that will do is, oh, and I'll put the command on the screen. It will open up what the test app is in there. So it says test app is running. This is kind of the boilerplate Angular website. And essentially, I don't really want to show all of this. I think it's just like, I kind of want to make this maybe a little bit centric to Game Engineer Labs, because I'll probably be doing some development maybe down the line. I don't know. So let's go back and go into WebStorm. But what you'll see is in the IDE, because we did ng serve, that essentially runs a, like, it's a little server that essentially shows off what is happening in your application, and it'll actually refresh as you make changes. So I'm going to go to the HTML file, and there's a ton of HTML, CSS stuff in here. Let's see what we're looking at. So I kind of want to maybe blow some of this away. Yeah, let's get rid of the style sheet. We'll get rid of everything that's in here. And let's go ahead and we'll just do a standard H1 tag. Oh, wrong spot. So we'll just do a little H1 tag. This is Game Engineer Labs. Cool. So, and when you click back down at the bottom of the screen or the bottom of the IDE, it'll actually show you the rebuilding of the application. And as you can see, it compiled successfully, so there shouldn't be any issues. So if we go back to Google Chrome, there we go. It shows us this is Game Engineer Labs. So this is going to be the website that we are deploying in AWS. I know, super basic, but you know, this isn't an Angular tutorial. Maybe I'll kind of do that sometime down the line. But what we need to do is we need to take this application and we actually need to build it. So let me go ahead, go back into WebStorm, and we'll close out of ng serve. So I believe that's, what is it? Command C. There we go. Okay, so you hit Control C, and that will actually close your ng serve command that was running. And what we want to do is we want to build the application. So ng build. And we don't have any configurations or anything like that set up. So just the standard ng build command will do. And what this will do is it'll actually compile all of our files and get it into a format that our S3 bucket can be reading down the line. So let's go ahead and make sure that that built correctly. So I'm going to go back to the Finder. I'm going to search for WebStorm. It's going to pull up maybe WebStorm projects. Sorry for the jump cut there. Took a little while to build. Not really sure why. Thinking it might just have to do with that this is a fresh install, a fresh project. But anyways, it went ahead and it built the necessary files that we need to drop into S3. So if you look in our test app folder, you'll see a new folder that says dist. And all these items that are in the dist test app folders are what we need to actually drop into our S3 bucket. So let's go ahead and jump into AWS, open up Chrome, go to our AWS Management Console, and we will go to S3. And now when you're actually deploying a website, there's kind of two things that needs to happen. And it has to do with like a little quirky thing about the internet. You have to set up essentially what is two S3 buckets. And the reason why is you need your main like root domain, which in this case, I think we'll call gameengineerlabs.io. And then we also need a bucket for our subdomain because our subdomain is going to be www.gameengineerlabs.io. And so we have to create those two buckets so that we could properly route it. I'm going to walk through the first one, the main root domain first, to make this a little bit easier and a little bit more consumable. And then once we complete those steps, we'll jump back in and I'll kind of show you the steps again. So let's go ahead and create a bucket. The bucket name is going to be gameengineerlabs.io. And we're going to change the region. I typically do everything out of US West 2. I find that US West 2 tends to be cheaper, but definitely check some of the cost calculators in AWS to get the most up-to-date pricing, because this does change fairly regularly. Since we're using this S3 bucket as essentially a container for our website, we need it so that people can actually access it, at least at the start. There's once everything's set up, there's ways to actually lock down the S3 bucket so people can't just, willy-nilly navigate to your S3 bucket to view your site. But I won't be covering that. I will actually put a tutorial on where you can go check that out if you want to do that. But in this case, we don't want to block public access. We want people to be able to access the bucket. So as you can see, there's this checkbox right here that says block all public access. We want to uncheck that. It's going to give you a little warning message. It says turning off block all public access might result in this bucket and the objects within becoming public. We have to acknowledge that it's becoming public. There's a lot of cases where you don't want to do this. In this particular case, we do. We don't care about bucket versioning. And we don't care about encryption. So we can keep all of the default settings for that. And let's go ahead and create the bucket. So as you can see, we have gameengineerlabs.io. We want to click on the bucket and we want to change the permissions of what our bucket allows. So in the previous step, we unchecked block all public access. Now that that's unblocked, we actually have to allow it so that anyone on the internet can go to the web address and view it. So let's go ahead and go to our permissions, and we want to go to bucket policy. So we want to edit the bucket policy. As you can see in the right-hand corner of this section, there's an edit button. We want to click on that. And it gives us essentially what is a little I guess policy builder tool. You can use that. I'm actually just going to go ahead and put this in here. Like, this is publicly available. I'll put the link to the documentation because AWS has a way to actually just do it by default because it's a pretty common task in AWS. So I will copy this. We will paste this in. And as you can see, it gives the version, date, and that's like basically telling you like, hey, this is what version of the policy that we want to use, as well as a statement. We can keep everything the same in here. The thing that does need to change is the resource. So as you can see, there's this ARN right here, and it says bucket name /star. That is not the name of our bucket. So we need to actually plop in our own name, and that's going to be gameengineerlabs.io. So we'll copy that. Overwrite this, and we have to keep the /star. And what that does is that if you put anything in the bucket outside of, the items from the actual build folder, then how should I put this? So if you put anything else in that bucket, you can actually navigate to it with this statement. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and save our changes. So click Save Changes. There we go. So now that is public. Make sure everything looks good. Check the properties. So there's one more item that's in here, and it's static website hosting. So it's under the properties tab, and at the very bottom, it says static website hosting, and we want to click edit. And we want to enable static web hosting. Because this is our root bucket, like our root domain, we want to directly host a static website. The index document is going to be index.html, and the error document in this case. So because this is an Angular application, we don't want to navigate to an error.html. I want the application to essentially handle all errors and let the built-in routing system handle it. So it'll be index.html. So this also depends on like what type of, I guess, technologies you're using and how you want to route error messages. I find that this works perfectly well for my use cases. But of course, like check out, like try to look up the technologies that you use and see if this is like an appropriate thing to do with whatever web technology that you're using. So we're going to save the changes. Cool. So that now gives us a success message, successfully edited static website hosting. So now everything should be good. It should give us a web address at the bottom. And now we need to put objects in the bucket. So we're going to go to back up to the top, go to objects, and it's going to say we don't have any objects in this bucket. So we want to upload. It's going to show, hey, there's no files or folders that are in here, but we can drag and drop in here. So we'll go back to our Finder window, search WebStorm projects, whatever I called that. Yep, there we go. WebStorm projects. There's our test app. And we want to go to the dist folder that was created when we did our ng build command. It's going to show our test app folder. Click on that. And then there's these items in here. So we want to select all of them. And we want to drop them on the page. So as you can see, it says that there's 7 total files, 212.5 kilobytes. So as you can see, it shows us 7 total files. We want to upload. Cool. And as you can see, it's uploading. There's not a ton of folders and files, so that happened pretty quick. And we didn't get any error messages, so we'll go to the top right-hand corner and click close. And now we can see all of our objects have been on there. So now that everything's in there, we want to make sure that our app is displaying correctly. So let's go to our main buckets tab. And let's go back to GameEngineerLabs.io. Okay, well, I was in the right spot. Sorry about that. Let's click on properties, scroll down, and we want to find that static website hosting web address. So when we edited this, it actually created a website endpoint. You want to save this website endpoint for the next step that we're about to do. So we'll copy that. I am going to throw it into a notes folder. New note. Cool. So now that that's there, let's click on the endpoint and see if it builds. Yes. So as you can see, we put in the web address, or in this case, clicked on it, and it took us to the little website that we had built. This is Game Engineer Labs. Cool. So the next step of what we want to do is we want to, well, let's think about this. What do we want to do? So the next step I think that we should do is we need to kind of lock down this site or show that it's a secure site. So we want to use certificates to show that, like, obviously this isn't some like hacky website, that we're a verified, organization. So let's go ahead and set up our certificates. And what we're going to use is it's a service within AWS called ACM. So if you go to the top search bar and type in ACM, it'll give you as the top hit Certificate Manager. So we'll click on Certificate Manager. And there is actually a little trick to this, and it's super important. Because of the way that certificates work, if you want to use them in Cloudfront, which we are going to do, you have to create the certificate in a specific zone within AWS. In this case, it's North Virginia. if you create this cert outside of North Virginia, this will not work, at least as of this recording. So make sure that you're in North Virginia. If you're not, you're going to have some headaches with this, and you'll ultimately have to recreate everything and kind of remap things. So just make sure from the get-go that you're in North Virginia. But what we want to do is we want to click on request a certificate. We want to request a public certificate. Click next. And the fully qualified domain. So it's GameGenierLabs.io. We're going to add another name to the certificate. And in this case, it's going to be star.GameGenierLabs.io. Okay. So as you can see, we have two web addresses. The first bucket that we set up was for GameGenierLabs.io. That star.GameGenierLabs.io for the other domain name is going to be the other bucket that we create. Because the way that certs work, I have to request them pretty much up front, or it's going to cause some really weird, funky things that I have to do, and I'll have to recreate the cert. I really don't want to do that. So we're just going to go ahead and pop it in like this, and I'll kind of show you how everything connects once we get through this process. For validation method, we want to do DNS validation and click request. Okay, perfect. So now that we requested the certificate, it brought us here back to the certificate. So you can see that there are two different ones. There's one for GameGenierLabs.io, and then there's another one for star.GameGenierLabs.com. As you can see, the status of GameGenierLabs.io, it says pending validation, and for the one at the bottom, it says issued. So we want to go to the one that says pending validation, and let's click on it. So it's showing you, hey, these are actually both pending validation, and it's giving us specific CNAME records. So I have already created I've already requested a domain name in Route 53 for these items. So what you want to do is, if you've already done this and you're using Route 53, there's a little option that says create records in Route 53. When you click that, it'll search Route 53 for these domains and automatically tie the CNAME records to the domain for verifying that this is like an actual, like the cert's good. It shows that like we're, on the up and up. But if you do not use Route 53 for your hosting or for your domains, you essentially have to take these CNAME records and you have to drop them in whatever service that you use. If it's GoDaddy, you actually have to create two CNAME records for both of these. I will link documentation that shows where you could find and how to do that so that you can go through this process without any of the headaches. I know a lot of people usually pick one technology, but obviously people will use AWS for specific things. Some people will use GoDaddy for certain things, where they'll use a third-party service. I want to be able to at least link you guys to some documentation that shows you how to do it if you're not using AWS. But in this case, let's go ahead and create records in Route 53. And it's going to ask us, hey, do you want to add these to your Route 53 DNS record? Yes. So we want to create the records, and it's going to be pending validation. Let's go ahead and refresh this to see, did it pick it up? It's still pending validation. Well, let's go to Route 53 and see if it went to our hosted zone. I do not see it as of yet. Okay, did that? Oh, wait, yeah, nope, here it is. It's here. So as you can see in our Route 53 DNS record, we have our CNAME record that's there. So let's go back to ACM, our certificate manager, and make sure that this has picked up. Okay. So this is important. When it comes to validations for certificates and like those types of records in ACM, it can be a quick process. It usually is, but with the way that AWS checks, sometimes it can take upwards of an hour to 2 hours before your cert gets validated. So I'm going to go ahead and wait till this pending validation is done, and I will be back with you guys in a second. Okay, sorry for the jump cut there. As you can see, with our domains, we have a success message, which means that ACM has picked up that CNAME record being dropped into our DNS, and it's recognizing that we are who we say we are. So the next step of what we need to do is we need to kind of connect all of these pieces together. We need to bind our cert in some way. We need to essentially get Route 53 to recognize that our website is loaded into AWS, and the glue to all of those pieces is going to be Cloudfront. Cloudfront is a CDN service, and long story short, what it is it's a global content delivery network. So it's a collection of servers across, the entire planet that essentially cache your website. But let's go ahead and create a distribution. So, okay, sorry for the jump cut there. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to put in the origin domain. When you click on this, there's going to be something a little deceiving that happens. It's going to show you your S3 buckets that you have set up. It could be really tempting to click on the gameengineerlabs.io.s3.amazon, like that whole setup because we just set it up. That is not what we want. It's the endpoint web address that we had that I told you to copy down for the Cloudfront distribution. So we're going to paste that in. There is going to be one difference though. We want to take out part of this URL, specifically the http://. We want to remove that, and we just want our gameengineerlabs.io.s3-website endpoint web address. We're going to keep essentially almost all of this the same, except for we want to change viewer policy. So we want to change that to redirect HTTP to HTTPS because we're setting up certs. So we want people to use our secure website. The other thing that we need to change is under settings. As you can see, there is custom SSL certificate. This is what we need to pop in for our web address here. So it's going to be gameengineerlabs.io. Make sure that's there. Oh, and then we also need to change. There should be additional settings here. Why can I not find it? Oh, here we go. Alternate domain names. So in this case, we want to do our gameengineerlabs.io. So let's go ahead and check this one more time. I kind of jumped around a little bit and had to do some checking with documentation just to make sure I was doing this correctly. We changed the origin domain. We put the actual S3 endpoint sans the HTTP : //. We also updated, let's see if I can find it here, alternate domain name. So we did put in gameengineerlabs.io because that's the one that's recognized in our cert and in Route 53. We added our custom SSL certificate, so our gameengineerlabs.io. And everything else we're going to keep the same. So when that's done, and now that it is, we're going to click on Create Distribution. So in this case, and probably one thing that I should have covered as a part of creating the distribution, you can select how many regions and locations you want your website to be cached as. My price class that I had underneath settings is use all edge locations, which is best performance. This utilizes pretty much the entire network of Cloudfront, which is worldwide. If your website is essentially going to be for US consumption only, you can actually select North America, or if it's for Asia, you can select Asia. You don't have to necessarily use all edge locations, because this will increase your costs of your website over time. And it also costs money as people are accessing it from those specific locations. This is necessary if you're trying to lower the latency of getting your website to your end users. If most of your traffic's in the US, I would say use like North America versus then using all edge locations, because not only is it less expensive, but you're also not paying extra for things that you're not using. But of course, usage may vary. There are ways to check if you want to do this or not. So I would just encourage you to make sure that you're looking at kind of the metrics around your site. Let's go ahead and check the distribution. So it looks like the distribution is still deploying. Let me, while this is deploying, I'm going to go ahead and check some things, and I'll be back with you guys in just a second. Okay, so I got a little bit impatient and I went ahead and checked out the domain name. So as you can see, there's the Cloudfront URL. Let's go ahead and copy this, paste it in, and I'll show you. Awesome. So now this is actually deployed to Cloudfront. Now, I do want to preface this. So as it's still saying, okay, well, now it's showing as deployed. If it's showing that it's in a deploying state, in a lot of cases, if you're trying to access it, like in the US, and you've put it in a US based region within AWS, it happens pretty quickly. So you can kind of sometimes check to make sure, but it won't necessarily propagate to all of the servers around the world for upwards of like 30 minutes to an hour. And sometimes, depending on the location and like different just things happening across the internet, it could actually take upwards of 24 hours for it to successfully propagate. It's just, it happens. You just got to check it out and make sure that it's working. But in this case, we know that CloudFront is properly routing to our website now. So now what we need to do is that we need to put this into Route 53 so that when people go to GameEngineerLabs.io, they're actually going to the website. So let's go ahead and go up top, and we'll go to Route 53. Perfect. Okay, we'll go back to our hosted zones, and we want to go to GameEngineerLabs.io, click on that, and now we want to create an alias record in our DNS. So let's create a record. And what we want to do is we want to keep it GameEngineerLabs.io. It is an A record, and we want to put an alias in. So that alias is going to be CloudFront distribution. So you click on that, and it's going to be simple routing. And luckily, it already brings up all of our distributions. I went ahead and copied it, so I'm just going to paste it in there. And we want to do simple routing. In my case, I'm not going to evaluate target health. I actually don't know if you could do that here. Yeah, I think if you do more complex routing, you can actually evaluate the target health, but I'm not going to be doing that in this case. So let's go ahead and create the record. Ooh, what do we got? Oh, a record already exists. Let's go back. Oh, this is actually from a previous tutorial. So let's go ahead and delete the record because we don't need that record anymore. It doesn't even work. Go back, create the record, keep it GameEngineerLabs.io, a record, alias the CloudFront distribution, and then put in our CloudFront URL and create record. Now that should work. Yes. So that works now. So what we should be able to do is we should be able to go to GameEngineerLabs.io, and it should work. With kind of the way that DNS works, it doesn't always update right away. So if this doesn't work for you, within the first like 15, 30 minutes, give it some time. Don't get so bogged down that it's not working immediately, because this stuff takes time to propagate and change. But we'll go ahead and go to GameEngineerLabs.io, click on it, bam. So as you can see, we have GameEngineerLabs.io is working, and to the left of our web address, we have our actual cert information. So it's showing the connection is secure. Yep, certificate is valid. And I believe you can even pull up our certificate information. Yes. So GameEngineerLabs.io issued by Amazon. So we are good there. Okay. So there is one problem, and I brought this up previously. If you try to go to www.GameEngineerLabs.io, oh, actually I think I messed up the web address. So if you go to www.GameEngineerLabs.io, yes, it'll show you that the website can't be reached. So what do? We need to create and actually kind of go through this process again, but we can kind of skip some steps. So we don't have to create a CloudFront distribution or do anything like that. So we'll go back into AWS, and we are going to go to our S3 bucket, or S3 buckets. So we'll click on S3. And now we want to create a new bucket, and this one's going to be called www.GameEngineerLabs.io. I'm going to do US West 2. Again, I think maybe I select US West 1 for the first one. I don't know. I don't remember. Just try to keep your regions, I guess, somewhat consistent, or maybe that's just something I do. We don't want to block public access, so we'll click that. We want to acknowledge again. And then we want to use the default settings and create the bucket besides those items that I talked about before. So as you can see, we have www.GameEngineerLabs.io. That bucket is now there. We'll click on the bucket. We will go to properties. And we'll do permissions first like we did last time. So we will go to permissions, and we will update the bucket policy, and we will edit it. And we have our little policy builder show up again. And we're just going to use the same command that we used last time. Or I guess the same policy document as last time. Excuse me. And we will copy our bucket name and replace that. Cool. So that should be good, and we should be able to save our changes. Okay, it's showing is publicly accessible. Now we want to go back to properties, and we want to do static website hosting. So there's going to be one key difference that we are going to do with this. We're going to enable website hosting, but instead of hosting a static site, because we don't want to have to manage two separate versions of our site, it gets kind of hairy when you do things like that. We want to do a redirect. So we're going to click on redirect request for an object. And what we want to do is, I believe we want to use the GameEngineerLabs.io web address, and we're going to select HTTPS as the protocol. Okay, so hostname GameEngineerLabs.io and the protocol HTTPS. And we'll go ahead and save our changes. And that should work. So let's go ahead and make sure that this is routing correctly. Perfect. Okay, so I clicked on the endpoint that was on that bucket, and it took me to GameEngineerLabs.io. So we know that that is working. But now we need to tie it so that when people actually type in www.GameEngineerLabs.io, it then routes. So that's going to be back in Route 53. And the good thing is we can actually skip the CloudFront distribution because we don't need two separate distributions to handle that. All of the routing will essentially handle what we need to do. Okay, sorry for the jump cut there. So what we want to do is we want to create a record set. Click on that. And in this case, the record name is going to be www. And of course, the dot is already there, so we don't have to add that to the record name. We're going to route. We're going to do an A record, and then it's going to be an alias. So we'll click that, and the endpoint is going to be an alias to an S3 website endpoint. And so in this one, we are going to go to, Should be US West 2. Make sure it's there. Yes, www.gameengineerlabs.io. Click on that and create the record. So it's taking a moment, and just like before, it could take a few minutes to upwards of 24 hours for the changes to be reflected. Usually I give it like 15-30 minutes, and then that kind of tells you if something might not be working correctly. But let's go ahead and open this up, and we'll go to www.gameengineerlabs.io and see if it takes us to where we need to go. Oh, wait, there we go. It propagated. Perfect. Had a little bit of a heart attack. So sometimes what happens is when you go through this deployment process, if you've tried to go to the web address and it doesn't work, it'll sometimes cache it. So when that happens, you have to actually dump your cache. I won't go through how to do that here, but dump your cache, then try to go to the web address if it doesn't work, and then see if it works. In this case, it automatically refreshed, it picked up the changes, and we have that. But I think that is it. I mean, hopefully you guys learned something through this. I know, like, for me, there's a lot of steps involved with this process. I create a ton of cheat sheets, and I have a ton of documentation that I reference for when I do this professionally. And of course, I also create a lot of automated processes around this, so I don't really have to remember it. But, you know, to just teach you guys, it's, you know, sometimes it's just good to refresh my own memory of how to do this and go through the documentation and show you guys how to do it. But of course, if you guys like the comment, or if you like the content, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, my name's Logan. Thank you for watching Game Engineer Labs today, and I will see you guys later. Thanks.